I was scrubbing out the last of the blueberry jam from Gran's cast iron pot when my brother called. Not texted. Called. Which was already strange, because my brother and I don't really call each other. We're a texting family. Quick, efficient, no small talk. So when his name lit up my screen at 7:43 on a Tuesday morning, I almost dropped the pot into the sink. I picked up. "Hey, did you talk to Mom and Dad recently?" His voice had that careful, measured quality he gets when he's trying not to sound worried. I've known that tone my whole life. He used it when he told me our dog had to be put down, when he told me Gran had fallen and broken her hip 2 winters ago. "Not since Sunday," I said. "Why?" He paused. "They posted photos on Facebook. Looks like they're in Whistler." I turned off the tap. "What?" "Yeah, like the Fairmont, the one with the rooms that start at $600 a night." I stood there holding the dish towel, dripping water onto Gran's kitchen floor, and I felt something settle in my chest. Not surprise exactly. More like a confirmation of something I'd been trying not to think about for months. "Hold on," I said. "Let me call you back." I set my phone down on the counter. Outside the window, Gran's yard was starting to go gold and rust at the edges. It was late September in Nova Scotia, and the maples were doing what they do. I'd come out here for the week to help her close up the garden before frost. Stack the patio furniture. Pull the last of the kale. Make sure the storm windows were seated properly. Small things. The kind of things she used to do herself, before her arthritis got bad enough that she couldn't trust her hands on a ladder anymore. She was still asleep upstairs. She slept later than she used to. I picked up my phone and opened the family group chat. Nothing from my parents. Then I went to my mom's Facebook page. We're not friends on it, but her profile is public because she never figured out how to change that. And there it was, post an hour ago. My mom's hand holding a champagne flute. The mountains blurred soft and perfect in the background. Celebrating life, with 3 pink heart emojis. I scrolled down, more photos. A hot tub, a king bed with white linen, a dinner plate with something architectural on it. My dad's sunburned face grinning at the camera. My stomach turned over slowly, like a stone rolling downhill, because I knew, better than almost anyone, exactly what account they would have used to pay for that room. Let me back up. Gran. My grandmother on my mom's side has lived in that house outside Wolfville for 41 years. She and my grandfather bought it when they were young and broke and optimistic, and they fixed it up slowly the way people did then. New roof one year, new kitchen the next. My grandfather died 11 years ago, and Gran stayed on by herself, which everyone in the family accepted because Gran is not a woman who leaves a place she loves just because it gets quiet. When my grandfather passed, he left behind a small estate. Nothing dramatic. He wasn't a wealthy man, but he'd been careful his whole life, the way that generation was careful, and he'd managed to put away around $190,000 in registered savings, plus the house, which was paid off. His will was straightforward. The house went to Gran outright, and the savings went into a family trust that Gran would draw income from and which would eventually pass to their children, my mom and her brother, my Uncle Ron, and from there to me and my brother and our cousins. My grandfather had been a careful man, but he'd trusted my mother to help manage things because she'd always been the organized one in the family, the one who handled paperwork and talked to the bank and remembered appointments. She had signing authority on Gran's trust account. That felt reasonable at the time. Logical. That was before. I'm an accountant. I don't say that to sound impressive. It's just relevant context. I've been working in public accounting since I graduated from Dahl, and I do personal and small business tax returns, and I understand, at a fairly granular level, how money moves and where it goes and what certain patterns mean. And about 8 months before the morning, my brother called me from Whistler. I'd started to notice patterns in Gran's financial statements that I did not like. Gran had given me access to her accounts 2 years earlier, after she had a small health scare, and decided she should have someone she trusted keeping an eye on things. She'd asked my mom first, but my mom already had signing authority, and Gran, in one of her quietly sensible moments, said she didn't want the same person doing both jobs. So she added me as a view-only account holder. I couldn't move money. I could only see it. At first, everything looked fine. The trust was drawing down slowly, as expected, covering Gran's living expenses, the property taxes, the occasional home repair. Normal. But then I started noticing withdrawals that didn't match anything Gran mentioned. Larger amounts, irregular timing, and a pattern that pointed unmistakably toward my parents. I didn't say anything right away. I watched for 3 months, making notes in a spreadsheet I kept locked on my personal laptop. I told myself I was being careful, that I needed to be sure. Honestly, I think part of me was hoping I'd find an explanation that made sense. That I was missing something. I was not missing something. By the time I drove out to Wolfville to help Gran close up the garden, I had documented $34,000 in withdrawals over 18 months that I could not account for with any of Gran's actual expenses. My grandfather had left $190,000. After legitimate costs, there should have been approximately $158,000 remaining. My records showed $124,000. I had not yet figured out what to do with that information. And then my brother called. I didn't tell Gran that morning. She came downstairs in her housecoat at 8:30, same as always, and she made us tea, and we sat at the kitchen table and talked about whether the kale was worth pulling or whether the first frost would do the job for us. She was sharp and funny and entirely herself, and I sat across from her and smiled and felt like I was carrying something very heavy in my chest. After breakfast, I called my brother back. "How long do you think they've been planning this?" he asked. "I don't know," I said. I was standing in the backyard out of earshot of the kitchen window. "But I've been watching the trust account and something's been off for a while." He was quiet. "How much?" he finally asked. "At least 34,000, maybe more. Some of it went through accounts I can't see." He swore, which my brother almost never does. Then he said, "What do we do?" That was the question. And it was a harder question than it sounds, because we were not just talking about money. We were talking about our mother, our family, Gran, who was 81 years old and who had no idea, as far as I could tell, that any of this was happening. Who still talked about my mom like she was someone who could be trusted. I called a lawyer that afternoon, a friend from university. She'd gone into estate law, which felt providential. I gave her the broad outlines, and she told me that what I was describing sounded like it could constitute a breach of fiduciary duty and possibly fraud, and that I should stop watching and start documenting, and that I should explore having my mother's signing authority removed from the trust account before any further withdrawals could occur. She also told me it was going to get complicated. She was right. The next few weeks were some of the hardest of my life. I got the documentation together, bank statements, timestamps, cross-referenced against my parents' social media. Yes, really. The weekend that $4,200 came out of the trust, my mom had posted photos from a spa in Prince Edward Island. The week $6,800 disappeared. My dad had been driving a rental car that showed up in the background of a photo tagged in Montreal. It wasn't airtight, but it was a pattern. I worked with Gran's estate lawyer, she had one, from when the trust was set up, to have my mother's signing authority suspended, pending an audit. That required Gran's sign-off. That required calling Gran. That conversation happened on a Thursday evening. We sat at the kitchen table again, same as every morning, except the tea went cold between us. I showed her the spreadsheet. I didn't editorialize. I just showed her the numbers and let her read them. She was quiet for a very long time. "I wondered," she finally said. Her voice was steady. "I thought I was being foolish, getting confused in my old age." She hadn't been confused. She'd been gaslit, slowly and incrementally by her own daughter. Gran signed the paperwork. Her signing authority was suspended. The trust account was frozen pending review. And then we waited. My parents came back from Whistler on a Sunday. I know this because my mom posted a photo of herself at Halifax Stanfield with a rolling suitcase and the caption, "Home Sweet Home," which, under the circumstances, felt like a taunt delivered to no one in particular. My brother and I had agreed. We would let the process work. We would not call, not confront, not tip them off that anything had changed. We would wait for the lawyers. What happened instead is that my mother called Gran on Monday morning to ask if she could borrow money to cover a bill that was apparently overdue. She said she'd pay it back. She said it was just temporary. Gran told her the account had been frozen. There was a very long pause on the line. "What do you mean, frozen?" my mom said. "I mean the account is frozen," Gran said. She told me this later, calm as anything, sitting at that same kitchen table. "I mean that there's an audit happening. I mean that you should speak to a lawyer." My mom called me 20 minutes later. I want to be careful about how I describe that phone call, because I'm not interested in making my mother into a cartoon villain. The truth is messier than that. And I think the messiest is actually the important part. She was not apologetic. Not at first. She was angry, and then she was defensive. And then she started talking about how hard things had been, how my dad's business had struggled since COVID, how they'd had no choice, how it was technically family money and they'd only been borrowing it, how Gran had more than enough and wasn't going to miss it. I listened to all of it. And then I said, Gran missed it. She noticed. She thought she was losing her mind. That landed. I heard my mom's breath change. That money was set up to take care of her, I said. Not to take care of you. Those are different things. She said I was being dramatic. She said we could work this out quietly. She said, did I really want to do this to the family? I'm not doing anything to the family, I said. This is already done. I hung up. The audit took 6 weeks. It confirmed what I documented, and then some. The total unauthorized withdrawals came to just over $41,000. My parents' lawyer sent a letter suggesting that the withdrawals had been a misunderstanding and offering to arrange repayment. Gran's lawyer responded with a counteroffer that involved actual repayment on a structured schedule, a formal acknowledgement of the breach, and the permanent removal of my mother's signing authority. My parents signed. They didn't have much choice. The $41,000 is being repaid in monthly installments. It's a slow process. Gran has seen 3 payments so far. I check every month, same as I've been checking for 2 years. The trust balance is ticking back up, slowly. It's not what it was. But it's something. The harder math is the other kind, the kind you can't put in a spreadsheet. My mom and I have spoken a handful of times since then. The conversations are careful and short and feel like walking on ice that might not hold. She still doesn't fully admit what she did was wrong. She admits that it was handled badly, which is not the same thing, and we both know it. My dad hasn't called me directly. My brother is somewhere in the middle, talking to everyone and committed to no one, which is a position I understand even if it frustrates me. Gran is fine. More than fine, actually. She seems lighter, which I didn't expect. Like she'd been carrying a low-grade anxiety for 2 years and didn't realize it until it was gone. She still makes tea at the same table every morning. The maples outside her window went gold, and then bare, and now they're starting to bud again. She pulled the kale herself in October, before the frost got to it, because she said she wasn't ready to give that up just yet. I still drive out to Wolf, though, when I can. We don't always talk about anything heavy. We talk about the garden, and what she wants to do with the back corner where the old apple tree came down last spring, and whether it's worth planting a new one, given that it takes 10 years to bear fruit. She thinks it's worth it. She says she plans to be there in 10 years, and she says it with the particular confidence of a woman who has outlasted a great deal already. I believe her. I've thought a lot about what I would have done differently, whether I should have confronted my parents earlier before the number got to $41,000, whether I should have told Gran sooner, whether there was some version of this where I preserved everything, the trust, the relationship, the fiction of a family that handled things well. I don't think there was. I think some situations don't have a clean version. I think sometimes the only thing you can do is document carefully, move deliberately, and be willing to be the person who says the thing out loud, even when saying it costs you something. It cost me something. I won't pretend otherwise, but I think about Gran signing that paperwork with her arthritic hands, calm and clear-eyed, saying, I wondered. I thought I was being foolish, and I know that whatever it cost me was worth it. She is not foolish. She was never foolish. She was never foolish. She was just a woman who trusted her daughter, the way you're supposed to be able to trust the people who are supposed to love you. That trust was broken. But the rest of it, the house, the table, the tea, the garden that is still worth planting, that's still there. And so are we. I've thought about the word trust a lot since all of this happened. Not the legal kind, the account, the documents, the signatures, the other kind, the kind you extend to someone because you love them, and you assume they love you back in the same way, with the same basic respect for what's yours and what isn't. My grandfather built that trust fund slowly over decades out of careful living. He didn't have a lot, but he protected what he had, and then he trusted my mother to do the same for Gran. That's all he asked. It wasn't complicated. What I've come to understand is that when people take advantage of that kind of trust, it's rarely because they're purely malicious. It's usually because they've convinced themselves of a story. My mom had a story, that the money was sort of family money anyway, that Gran had more than enough, that they'd pay it back, that it wasn't really what it looked like. People are extraordinarily good at building stories that let them do what they want to do. And the more uncomfortable the truth underneath, the more elaborate and load-bearing the story has to become. The thing about actions, though, is that they don't care about your story. They leave a record. They have consequences that arrive eventually, in one form or another, whether you've prepared for them or not. My mom spent 18 months quietly moving money that wasn't hers, and she probably felt, during that time, that she was managing a situation, that she was in control. And then one Monday morning, she called Gran to ask for more, and the account was frozen, and the story she'd been living inside collapsed in about 30 seconds. That's not punishment in any grand cosmic sense. It's just how actions work. The gap between what you do and what eventually happens because of it can feel like a long time. But the gap always closes. I'm not interested in pretending I handled all of this perfectly. I waited longer than I should have. Part of that was caution, and part of it was something less flattering, a reluctance to be the person who broke things open, who made everything harder and messier and real. I kept hoping the numbers would somehow explain themselves. They didn't, and every month I waited, another withdrawal came through. What I know now is that doing the right thing and doing the easy thing are almost never the same thing, and the longer you wait for them to converge, the more it costs everyone. Gran told me she'd been feeling confused for over a year, quietly second-guessing her own memory, wondering if she was misreading her own statements. She wasn't losing her mind. She was just being kept in the dark by someone who found the dark convenient. The moment I showed her the spreadsheet, she became clear-eyed and decisive immediately. She signed the paperwork without hesitation. That told me something important. People can handle hard truths far better than we assume. What they can't handle, what quietly erodes a person, is being protected from reality for someone else's benefit. Gran is still in that house in Wolfville. The trust balance is climbing back, slowly. She's talking about what to plant in the corner where the old apple tree came down. She is not a woman defined by what was taken from her. She is defined by what she chose to do when she finally had the full picture. I think about that a lot. About how much of our lives is just being handed the full picture, finally, and then deciding what to do with it. She decided to plant something new. I think that's the right instinct.